Доброго дня, вітаю вас. Сьогодні ми записуємо інтерв'ю з Софі. Вона розкаже нам трошки про роботу в сфері, як сказати, комунікацій у сфері єврейських культурних продуктів, чи як сказати правильно? Ну, як зміг, так і сказав, нічого страшного. Так, Софі. Перше питання – це розкажи трошки про себе, і як ти, в принципі, потрапила у цю історію, ці проекти, пов'язані з єврейською культурною спадщиною.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. So a little bit about me. My background is that I studied French, German, and European studies at university, and then I focused in on European studies. And throughout studying Europe's history, of course, I came across Jewish history. And during my master's degree, I focused on memory, politics, and culture, and looked into whose voices get heard in history more than others, how we represent these voices, and also what history do we learn? Because we have the presumption that we all learn the same history, which, as we know now, is not true. And after university, I got my first job working as a communications expert at the European Jewish Cemeteries Initiative that focuses on preserving Jewish cemeteries. I worked there on an EU project with the goal to combat anti-Semitism and foster Jewish life. And this was my first professional experience. After working there for 6 months, I was promoted to working as a project manager. And the role involved a lot of different communication products, including videos, social media campaigns, but also online workshops and conferences. So traditional and non-traditional communication forms. And since then, I have built an expertise in online communication. I also have been freelancing for the past 2 years for Centropa. They have developed a big archive of Jewish stories. They interviewed lots of Jewish people in the early 2000s, and they shared their life, how they lived, how their families lived, and lots of pictures. And Centropa's projects now focus on how Jews lived rather than how Jews died. And in my full-time job, I work now as a project manager in digital education. I work on a variety of different political topics, but still on topics such as combating anti-Semitism. I now have specialized more in the context of Germany since I live and work here. And for example, Germany's special relationship with Israel and how, for example, people can become a citizen here and what knowledge they need to have of this history to be a citizen in Germany.
Look, Sophie, I think next question will be how we meet each other. Як ми познайомились?
Yeah, how we meet each other.
Yeah, how we meet each other. Our organization making a lot of products and not only videos. Now we work on a visualization of Ostrock synagogue. It's a very old and famous synagogue in Europe, in Eastern Europe. So we just creating how it looks before World War II. Because in war it was destroyed, yeah. And, now it's like a empty space. So we just try to show people how it looks before. If you want, I can show you.
Yes, I would love to see.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, it looks really. So you've made a 3D model.
Yeah, it's a 3D model, but after that it renders like 360 panoramas, I guess. So we can look in all directions.
Andrew made it.
Oh, wow.
His style. He made it a lot, and it's really cool, I think.
It's very impressive.
Because I'm director. Yeah.
There's like the main room. There's others, but the coolest one in the video.
Yeah, the quality is so good.
Ну, в общем, таке.
This is a nice view.
Yeah, this балкон. Як буде балкон? Balcony?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, this balcony is not exist now. Now here in this portal windows, because this part of building was destroyed. Now we stand in a destroyed part. So it's a lot of work to make in research and find what kind of floor plan it was. My English is so good. Okay.
I understand what you mean.
This саме головне. Так, зараз ми зупинимо. Так, ага, окей. Все.
Ta-da!
Окей, Софі. Дивись, наступне таке питання. Ну, це не зовсім питання. Я хотів би просто, щоб ти розповіла, як ми, в принципі, познайомились, якби над яким проєктом ми тоді працювали. І, власне, якби розповіси про ту організацію, в якій ми працювали, яка, власне, займалася єврейською культурною спадщиною.
So we met whilst I was working at the ESJF, and I was developing a series of videos that aim to raise awareness about Jewish communities in different countries. For example, we created a promotional video on the work that the ESJF did in Slovakia, and this video was used to show the government of Slovakia why this issue was so important and that they should fund the surveying of Jewish cemeteries. We typically split the work. I did the conceptual development and provided a script and a voiceover, and Andre did the editing of the videos. He went through all the footage and very carefully selected what matched the tone of the video and also how to best suit the storytelling. He was very easy to work with. I was always so impressed with his work. I now work in the field still with lots of design experts, and Andre was always able to get the work done in one take with very little instruction because he has such a professionality.
Thank you. Thank you. Софі, коли ти готувала текст, ти відчувала, що є певний бар'єр між тим, як би ти це розповідала про культуру, будь-яку іншу культуру, окрім єврейської? Ну, тобто, я задам трошки інакше питання. Чи було відчуття, що тематика єврейської культури додає додаткових проблем? Тому що це якась дуже чутлива тема чи складна додаткова тема. От чи виникали якісь додаткові проблеми?
Yes, this is a really good question. I think talking about such heavy historical and political topics is a challenge because you have to balance it's sensitive and also traumatic. How do you do this in a respectful way? Also, how do you achieve the goal? What is the goal of communicating about this topic? Do you want to raise awareness? Do you want to educate people? Do you want to make people change their mind? Do you want to demystify a site that they, for example, such as a Jewish cemetery that they have never seen before? So on the one hand, you have to be respectful to stories that are real. These people are real and are impacted by these topics. On the other hand, you have to imagine that not everybody knows something about this topic. We presume that everybody has the same base understanding of Jewish life and history, but often people really just don't know. So you have to break the topic down, make it accessible and simple, but not too simple that it's boring, based in stories and people as much as possible. But nowadays there's also always the risk that you might spark an unintended political debate, since right now there is a lot of stuff happening and people often draw a connection between Jewish history and current world politics that is not always necessary.
Софі, скажи, от дивись, ми займалися з тобою відео. Зараз в цьому проєкті ми робимо візуалізацію синагоги. Як тобі здається, які канали комунікації, скажімо так, найбільш ефективні в темі популяризації єврейської спадщини?
Again, a very good question. I think it really depends on the target audience and who you want to communicate to. Generally, I would say that multimedia storytelling always works very well because it connects people with realities that they've never seen before, such as a synagogue. If they've never seen what the inside of a synagogue looks like, it's a really powerful tool to be able to show the inside of that and demystify a place that people have never seen before. This also is the same with Holocaust survivors or the relatives of Holocaust survivors. I also think drone footage of Jewish cemeteries is very impactful too. Again, generally people just don't know these places exist, so it provides a physical testament that they did. And since some of these places have been destroyed or no longer exist, we have the need to digitalize these spaces and show what they would have looked like. I think this really can help people to imagine that. I think that younger audiences who are more active on platforms such as TikTok, actually they seem to like lower quality videos and media formats such as like, get ready with me while I talk to you about a certain topic. Younger people also use a lot of humor and irony in their communication and do trends to communicate about different things. In the context of Jewish history and heritage, this is particularly difficult because a lot of the history is very heavy, but I do think that some organizations have found ways to do this very impactfully. I think older audiences trust more traditional forms of communication and are very active on platforms such as Facebook. I noticed here that infographics perform very well that are fact-based. And also storytelling works particularly good with this target group. It can be pictures from an archive with text added. I know from my work with the ESJF that in Ukraine, the cemeteries that we worked on there have info boards next to them. So it would just be a physical information board with texts on what happened. I also think that this can also have an impact. Some of these boards have QR codes on now so that people can get additional information. But I think that a combination of all these things works well.
Софі, а скажи, а ти бачила вже фільм «Справжній біль» Real Pain?
I have not.
It's a cinema, I guess. Cinema or film? Yeah, what?
It's a film.
It take Oscar this year. It's a story about two Jewish guys from the United States who became to Poland and went to a house of their grandma. And it's a kind of strange thing. Ну, якби ти побачила цей фільм, ми могли б про це поговорити як частину медіа, але, на жаль, it's not very interesting film, so not a problem. Скажи, Софі, чи було в тебе відчуття, що твоя робота змінює суспільну думку про оцю єврейську спадщину, цю тему взагалі?
I hope that my work changes people's opinions. If I start on the fact level, some of the campaigns that I do have reached over hundreds of thousands of people. But it is the question whether this actually changes people's minds. It's hard to assess that with social media work. A lot of people do comment with praise and say they like it, or they reshare it. This would suggest that they agree with it, or that they want to share this message further. I do think that social media is just a part of people's lives, and that social media can start a conversation, it can provide context, it can help people build compassion and empathy, but a lot of real life conversations and educational work has to also take place alongside social media for real change to happen. It has to be a combination of educational work in real life and online learning.
Скажи, Софі, а як взагалі, от я в Україні бачу, що у нас якесь насправді дивне зміна відношення до взагалі от єврейської спадщини. З одного боку, я, мабуть, все частіше чую певні антисемітські якісь наративи, А з другого боку, наприклад, вчора було свято, коли ми згадували людей, які підтримували євреїв під час Другої світової. Тобто на державному рівні у нас іде підтримка цієї теми, але при цьому якісь і певні народні якісь такі хвилювання з приводу антисемітизму, так само вони присутні. Чи є якісь тебе, чи помічаєш ти щось подібне у Європі?
Yes, so I am originally from the UK, but I live in Germany and have lived in Germany for a long time. And through my work with the ESJF, I got to know quite a lot about different European countries and the history of their attitudes towards Jewish people, including in Ukraine. Across Europe, we do have a long history of anti-Semitism. And this is not something that has just started with the Holocaust. There were many pogroms in Ukraine where Jewish people were limited to do certain professions, etc. And Jewish people have had a long history of being persecuted. So these narratives don't just appear now, they've been there for a long time. And I think that now governments are over Europe working a lot more actively to foster Jewish life, make Europe a safe place for Jewish people, and especially led by the European Union. In Germany, where I live right now, there is a lot of funding for organizations working on combating anti-Semitism. Also in Germany, they recently changed the law for citizenship that, for example, if you would like to be if you would like to be a citizen in Germany, you have to agree that Israel has the right to exist. This is also connected to Germany's long relationship with Israel. So yeah, Germany is definitely very active on this topic. And I imagine that they would continue to support Jewish people in Germany.
And can you please tell more about your experience in working with the topic of the Holocaust, if you work about this, and inter-ethnic tensions? How work is going there, because it's like some sentences things that maybe not all people would get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is also a very interesting question. So I have been working for a lot of different organizations, and typically the organization decides the perspective that should be used when talking about these topics. For example, Centropa, they're an organization active in Germany, but also in Hungary and Ukraine. They really like to focus on how Jews lived rather than how Jews died. Their aim is to this one chapter of history, which was very terrible and dark, is often the only one we know about Jewish life. So they hope to help people have more empathy towards Jewish people by understanding that they were people just like you and me, and they lived very normal lives and contributed to the countries that they lived in. German Jews were also just German people, and they were citizens there too, and this really helps to build empathy towards those groups of people. So yeah, like I said, it depends on the client that I'm working for, but generally I think approaching such heavy topics requires a lot of empathy, a lot of research. Typically, I think that it's good that if you're working on these topics that you have some exposure to the group that you're working with, or you've done some research on this topic. And I think that it's really important to try to stick to the facts and cross-check your resources as much as possible. And I always think that critical reflection is important in this field. History, in the end, is a story often told by the people who have won the war or won wars. And so it's really important that we try to consider all perspectives and deal with them with empathy.
Дивись, Софі, вчора ми спілкувалися з Емілем, він з Брами Гроцької, це в Любліні, не знаю, можливо, ти з ним знайома, можливо, ні, не знаю, можливо, і не була там ніколи, але дивись, питання в чому? У нас в Україні, і я так розумію, що і в Польщі подібна ситуація, ми відчуваємо певну відірваність єврейської культури, історії від нашої теперішньої реальності. Тому що євреї великою мірою зникли з цих територій, їх немає, і це дуже окремі люди, які мають маленький вплив на соціальне життя сьогодні тут. І тому хотілося б спитати у тебе, чи є відчуття оцієї відірваності у Німеччині? Ну, оскільки ти там живеш, працюєш, чи все ж таки є відчуття, що ця культура, вона органічно вплетена в сьогодення?
Yeah, I think that Germany is a very particular case due to what they did in history, and they have really worked very actively to fund Jewish communities now in Germany to preserve what was left after the Holocaust, and also to educate the population on what the country's mistakes were and how they can learn from those mistakes. I think the phrase "never again" is very well known in Germany. In the UK, where I'm from, we also learn quite intensively about Jewish history. We mainly learn about the Holocaust, however, and it took me to work in the field to really understand that there is also a lot of Jewish history in the UK that I never knew about. Manchester, for example, where I'm from, has a huge Jewish community. I didn't really know this until after working more actively in the field. We also have Jewish cemeteries. I'd never seen one before working on the working in my first role in the Jewish heritage field. So I think that the UK still has quite a lot of work to do there, not just focusing on the Holocaust and the war, but also further stories and of the British Jewish people, for example. I think that Ukraine and histories, I think that countries that were behind the Iron Curtain have a very particular and unfortunate case that after the Holocaust and after World War II, the different governments, for example, used the tombstones from cemeteries as materials to build houses or in roads. And a lot of this history was forgotten. I know in countries such as Georgia that a lot of Jewish people were forced to change their names so that they could assimilate, and they forgot actually who they are. This happened all across the Eastern Bloc, that people, because of the aims of the government, that this history was forcibly forgotten. I think that now it's very hard to find what was lost. I think that even in countries like Ukraine, there are a lot of Jewish communities doing really hard work, like yourselves, to make sure that this is not forgotten. And I think that also you're doing a really great job, and that in comparison to other countries across the world, I don't think so many people are working so hard on this topic.
Дивись, Софі, оскільки тема єврейських кладовищ, вона, в принципі, як не крути, але вона зараз в Європі центральна, навколо якої відбувається якась діяльність, так, по темі єврейської спадщини. Можливо, не в Європі, а в Україні чи Східній Європі. Я знаю, що бувають такі випадки, як знаю, я сам з ними стикався, що певна діяльність наша там стикається з негативною реакцією. Можливо, в тебе був такий негативний досвід, що якісь проекти в цій тематиці викликали негативну реакцію соціальну. Чи був такий досвід, і що б ти порадила в такій ситуації, як діяти? Як згладити ці, скажімо так, напруження, які можуть виникати? Але якщо такого досвіду не було, то і слава Богу, там може і добре.
Yes, unfortunately, I have also been faced with a lot of negative comments regarding working in the Jewish heritage field. Since I started working more actively on TikTok on this topic, the comment section is often filled with anti-Semitism, hatred towards Jewish people, and also topics that are just not related to the Jewish heritage question. So if we're talking about, for example, a story of a person who was European, they were a Jewish person, they lived their life here, I don't think it's relevant then to comment about Israel and Palestine, for example. Although I think that conversation should be had, but not in the comment section that's trying to commemorate the life of somebody who has died due to persecution in Europe. I also, whenever I tell people I work in this field, people often just presume that I'm Jewish. I find this quite interesting too, since I'm not Jewish, and I kind of feel here the sentiment behind it is that only Jewish people should be interested in preserving Jewish history. I personally believe that as a European, that Jewish history is something that we all should be interested to preserve. Europe is a area that stands for unity, that stands for diversity, that stands for, that lots of religions should be able to coexist. And I really think that it's important that all Europeans are interested in preserving Jewish life. It's part of our shared story. And a lot of things that we have today in our world are thanks to Jewish people in Europe.
Дивись, Софі, коли я спілкуюсь з безпосередньо євреями, так? Тобто представниками єврейської спільноти, це найчастіше дуже іронічні, самоіронічні люди. Тобто вони самі жартують про себе, про свій народ, про свою культуру. І, в принципі, навіть мені дозволяли так само жартувати. Не всі, але я міг, тобто, скажімо так, вільно жартувати на цю тему. Що скажеш, чи взагалі це нормально нам, як не-євреям, наприклад, в комунікації використовувати якісь жартівливу форму? Чи взагалі ми могли би якось так легко про це спілкуватися і навіть якось іронізувати на цю тему? І чи це було би ефективно? Чи краще все ж таки лишити цю тему такою, серйозною?
Yeah, this is a really hard question because I know exactly what you're talking about. I also working with a lot of Jewish people and also people who I now consider my friends. They say sometimes really funny things and generalize things about Jewish people. In this case, I think I laugh when they share those jokes with me. However, I don't think it's appropriate for me to make those jokes as a non-Jewish person. I think nowadays the big question is about cancel culture and what is appropriate. I think that each individual person has to decide this, and it also depends on the context. If this is somebody that you have a close relationship with and that they would understand the joke and they would understand the reference, then I think it's appropriate. But if this is a person that you don't know or you don't have a relationship with, then perhaps it's not appropriate. But I think that's for each person to decide themselves.
Скажи, Софі, як ти думаєш, чи є якісь табу, якісь теми, які краще взагалі не піднімати? Для прикладу, ми ж розуміємо, що будь-які оці етнічні конфлікти, вони не були на рівному місці. Я нікого не намагаюся тут виправдовувати чи щось виправдовувати, але це завжди, так скажемо, діалог, який в якийсь момент переріс у конфлікт. Чи є якісь теми, які краще взагалі не зачіпати? Принаймні сьогодні.
No, I don't believe that there are any topics that shouldn't be talked about publicly. I think that it all depends on the aim behind the conversation. What is the goal of talking about these topics? Do you want to, sometimes the difficulty is that when you try to present a neutral topic in the Jewish heritage field or a cultural topic, people make it very political very quickly, and people want to be polarized about things. They don't want to have constructive discourse. They want to disagree. They want to argue in the comment section. And I don't necessarily think that the topic itself is the problem. I think that people have a stronger desire due to perhaps social media to disagree, which is really a shame. I think that every topic with the right intention, compassion, and consideration of the other person can be had, and it can be talked about.
Скажи, Софі, які, можливо, найбільш вдалі якісь проекти чи матеріали з твого досвіду були? Зараз, секундочку. Які матеріали в твоєму досвіді були найбільш вдалими? А що, можливо, ти зробила би інакше? Просто поділись своїм досвідом про найбільш якісь успішні кейси у твоїй діяльності, у цій сфері.
This is a challenging question.
Якщо не дивись, Софі, ти ж можеш не відповідати. Якщо це якесь занадто складне питання, на нього можна не відповідати. Ми ж всі ж свої.
I could also answer it. I just have to think a little bit.
Okay, that's okay.
Also because I work not just in the Jewish heritage field, so like I have a wider experience and I can kind of generally say what's working well right now online. But I did find, so maybe this is interesting to share. I found that with a lot of Jewish heritage organizations, there is not enough funding for successful social media work. Social media work does require using a diverse range of materials. It's a full-time job, and often a lot of organizations just don't have the funding for this. Also, now social media platforms are becoming more reliant on boosting for success, and so it is really hard to keep up with the algorithm, to keep up with the daily sacrifice that you have to make to social media to be able to reach the right target group. And I have found that anything that has an interesting and engaging story reaches a lot of people. And this is really hard to figure out the selling point of a story, which is, again, very difficult to do when it's a real life story, and also to look at stories kind of as a thing that needs to be sold. People nowadays are extremely overwhelmed on social media. They're bombarded with information, so it's very helpful when the story is timingly relevant. So for example, if it's Victory Day in Europe, it's useful to start telling stories about this topic maybe a few days before the day comes, and especially on the day. But as soon as that day's over, this is no longer relevant for the storytelling, and people will not be interested. People also are particularly interested in stuff related to world politics and war, so it's useful to talk about those topics and connect current topics with things that happened in the past and the lessons that it can teach us. I also, since I am working on a project called iMemory, which focuses on empowering young people to tell Jewish history, to talk about Jewish history. On TikTok, their videos have performed very well. They made them themselves. They wrote the scripts themselves. As a professional communicator, I was so impressed with how they do this and how they had the skill set to do this. But it wasn't necessarily the video that I would have made or the stories that I would have told. I think that young people have figured out their own way of communicating and how to get these messages across. I particularly am a fan of videos on Instagram. Reels work very well if you can make them engaging, and also if you can tell a story through a series of pictures, that can also work very well.
Окей, Софі, ми будемо потрошку закругляти наше інтерв'ю. Вибач, що ми тебе дуже мучили. Ну, я особисто мучив, тому що я абсолютно не готовий був. Я не вмію брати інтерв'ю, і це взагалі страждання. І я думаю, для тебе було страждання. Але все ж таки, поділись, будь ласка, якимись рекомендаціями для тих, хто хоче працювати у сфері комунікації, от у темі єврейської культурної спадщини. Якісь рекомендації, якби, для молодих і перспективних фахівців у цій сфері?
I think my tip for people working in the field would be to break down the big challenge into smaller steps. For example, first you need to think about what you want to communicate and what is the goal. And for example, do you want to raise awareness? And do you want to educate people? Or even do you want to entertain people, which is one of the biggest reasons why people use social media? And how can you hijack this need for people to be entertained with your goal to educate people? And then I would go carefully about researching the topic, consider all sides, and if possible, check with somebody who is directly impacted by this field or knows more about this field, and then figure out what is the best way to do this. Is it a video? Is it an infographic? Is it a picture from an archive? And then also don't be afraid to try and test different methods. Every different profile performs in different ways, and it's okay that you don't get it right the first time. Successful social media campaigns often take a few months to master and to figure out what works well. So yeah, it's okay to get it wrong the first time and try again.
Окей. Дякую тобі, Софі. Завершуємо наше інтерв'ю, але зараз ще трошки залишимося тут і договоримо. Я буду вибачатись, чого все так йшло, як пішло.